Welcome to my Canon 6D repair series. In this video, I'm going to show you how to put the camera back together. The first part that we're going to put on is the shutter assembly, and we're going to put it back onto the mirror box. Now we're going to need the screws that we have on diagram 3. When we put the shutter assembly on, we just need to watch this flat ribbon cable right here and make sure that it goes under this part right here. Then just line the shutter assembly up and it'll lay right down on top. Now we'll mount the entire mirror box assembly back onto the frame. We'll have to hold the mirror box and the frame together while we put a screw in. Next is the CCD. Before we can put this on, we'll need to put the 3 springs back on first. Now we'll just lay the CCD right over the top. We'll line the holes up that are in the frame, over the top of the spring, and also the post that's right next to the spring. Now we're going to replace the 3 screws that hold it down. Remember, these are toric head screws, and they need to go back in the exact same hole that they came from. That's because we marked each screw at each hole, and we're going to need to count the number of turns when we put them in so that we can get the CCD properly realigned. Okay, so I've got all 3 toric screws tightened all the way down. So what we're going to do now is we're going to need to take the numbers that we wrote down on this piece of paper for each one, and we'll back the screws off that amount so that we can get the lines or the marks that we put on the screw head and also the metal below it lined up. So the first one we'll do is this one, and it's just barely over half a turn. It's 0.6. Okay, on this one you can see that the mark on the screw is right here, and here's the mark on the piece of metal below it. So this one we had written down 0.6, so we have to just basically back this off a half a turn or a little more, but all it amounts to is just getting whatever it takes to get these 2 lined up closely. And once they're close, then we just eyeball it and line them up so that they're perfectly in line. So now you can see that these 2 marks are lined up pretty good. Now we'll go ahead and back these other 2 screws off so that their marks align also. Next we'll replace this anti-static plastic, put it down, and we'll put this piece of metal back over the top. Next is this piece of metal. It lays over the top right across here. Be sure that you get this flat ribbon cable over the top of it and that it doesn't go underneath. Now we'll go ahead and put this flat ribbon cable down. There's a post right here that we can put that ribbon down over the top of, and it'll hold it in place until we get the screw in there. Next, we'll put this bracket back on. All we have to do on this end is just sit it down. There's a post right back here where the hole on the left will go over that post. Then the other end, the hole on it, should line up with the hole where the screw will go. The next part we're going to put on is the power board. Reconnect the battery connector before you put it on there. With the board laying down, you can just lay the shield right over the top now. Now there's two spots that you want to watch for when you put the shield down. One is right here. It's like a set of fingers that the edge of the shield will go down inside. There's another set right here. So if the shield is going down inside, then the holes on the shield where the screws go, they should be lined up pretty good then. The next part we're going to put on is the bottom board. Before we do though, we want to make sure that this flat ribbon cable right here is connected to this little metal frame down here. There's two fingers on it that the flat ribbon cable will go over. We can go ahead and put the bottom board on now. We just want to make sure that these flat ribbon cables don't get stuck underneath the board. Next, we'll put the tripod mount back on. Next, we need to put this piece of metal on. Now we can go ahead and hook up the flat ribbon cables and the other connectors. Before we can put the main board back on, we're going to need to replace this anti-static plastic here. Now on this piece right here, you can see there's a hole in the corner. That lines up with this post right here. When you lay this main board down, you just want to watch these flat ribbon cables and make sure that they're all up on top of the board. After you have the board laying on there, you want to push on this part right here. That's because there's a connector and a socket on the back side, and you want to make sure that it gets seated properly. Now we can go ahead and connect the flat ribbon cables and the other connectors. Now when you're putting this anti-static plastic back down, if it doesn't stick anymore, you can use something like this Elmer's rubber cement and put a little bit of that on there, and it'll help hold it down. Plus it's easy to remove if you have to remove it. You can use this same stuff on the grips on the camera also. Now we'll put the flat ribbon cable for the CCD back on. Now there's no way that you can put this on backwards because the two connectors are different. Now we'll go ahead and put the end of the camera on. We'll also need to put this piece of rubber right here before we do. When you put the end on, just make sure that this piece of metal right here goes inside this little groove right there. Then just set it on, and then we'll put this screw in to hold it down. Now we can go ahead and put the top part on. We just want to make sure and connect this flat ribbon cable up first, right to this socket. Then you can just slide it on. And you can tell that it's in far enough when you see that these holes line up with the holes behind it. The same with the front. With these two right here, there's a hole here and here that will need to line up with the holes behind it. Okay, we can go ahead and put this screw in on this end now. And also the screw that's on the other end that comes in from underneath. Now we can put the focus knob for the viewfinder in. You just want to make sure that that's seated properly before you put the screw in. So just turn it a little bit and then you'll feel it fall down into place. Now we can connect these two flat ribbon cables. This one is just a connector and a socket, so you just push down on it. Now this one has a socket that has a bar, a locking bar on it. You want to make sure that that bar is up before you push that in there. Then push the bar back down. The next part we're going to put on is the front cover, but before we do, we need to put this little piece of rubber back down right on the edge of the tripod mount plate. Something else that you want to put back on if it came off, because it might not have come off on you, is this rubber cover that goes over this notch right here on the side of the battery compartment. You just slide it in from the bottom right here and it'll lock in place. Now we can just go ahead and sit that front panel right on there, and you can see that it slides underneath the end piece over here. Now we'll go ahead and replace all the screws for the front cover. Now we'll reconnect this wire. And you'll want to make sure that this wire is tucked back out of the way. Just push it down inside. Next, we'll put the bottom on. Now we can go ahead and put the screws in. The next part we'll put on is the entire back piece. We want to make sure and connect this flat ribbon cable up first. Now we'll go ahead and put the screws in for it. And now we'll put the last end piece on. Now we can slide the viewfinder cushion back on. Now we can go ahead and put all of the grips back on. And that's all there is to it.